when you live in an area like this where, you know, I'm far north, and it gets extremely cold here, as you might have, and actually it was in the beginning of this video, it showed that, you know, we can get temperatures here that are colder than -50, and that's just straight temperature. You get a wind chill with that, maybe a 20-mile-an-hour wind or whatever, and I've been out here when there's been temperature, including the wind chill, in the -70s, and there's just, you just can't use you can't even use your equipment in temperatures like that, no matter how well you take care of it. But you certainly want to keep it in good shape when you do get temperatures that are, say, -40 and above, because it's still pretty hard on them. That's cold enough. Long screw. This is the cover on the air filter, and right underneath the air filter, it's just a little foam pad. That's where the carburetor is, right down there. So there's the carburetor right here. Well, too close. Right here, and that's where it goes down into the engine, to the top of the carburetor throat. So many times I've seen people use starting fluid. It's really cold, the engine doesn't want to start, but you need to get it going, and they'll pull it over, crank it over. Don't use starting fluid. That stuff is horrible on your engine. You can use a hairdryer. This is heat gun, obviously, and don't want to hold it too close. This little housing is plastic. You don't want to melt it, especially with the heat gun. These are powerful. And just blow warm air down there. And this works on everything. Cars, it'll work on your tractor, it'll work on your diesel tractor. It doesn't matter. Now make sure that the choke is open and the throttle is wide open, because you want that air to get right down, go as much as you can through the carburetor and right up to the valves and possibly right into the cylinder chamber. But at least you want to get it right down through the carburetor. And like I said, on a diesel engine, a gas engine, it doesn't matter. This will get you started, and it won't hurt your engine at all. Now, I would do it right now and show you, but I have to drag a generator all the way out here to do this, and it's oddly enough, it's just not a bad day today, so it'll start anyways, I'm sure. So let's find out. I let that engine warm up for a minute. I want to warm up this pump, because the oil in here from the pump down there is going to be so thick from being cold. If you're not careful, you could bust out some of these seals. So I'll just do a run. And let it run back. I'll do that a few times. Just hang on for a minute here. Whew, okay. I'll do that a few times, just out and back with no load on it, no log or anything. That warms up the oil in the tank, which in turn warms it up throughout the whole system, because as I said, that oil can get so thick that you know, you can damage a seal or something. That brings me to another thing. When you're running this thing and you've had it going for, you know, quite a while, this tank can get very hot, so be careful you don't lean on it or something, because yeah, it's not fun. Just basic maintenance, you know, make sure you got air in your tires, and anywhere you can, you know, put a little oil on any of the joints. Make sure that your hitch area is cleaned up if you plan on moving it anywhere. I sometimes will put a little bit of oil or something down on here when I'm running it, because, you know, just relieve some of the friction, some of the drag. But these things are tough, you know, they're pretty strong. At some point, someday, these hydraulic hoses are under a lot of pressure. They'll probably wear out, you know, and that'll be no good. But that's not going to happen for a long time. And being under the cover here in the woodshed, it's not going to get a lot of ultraviolet light on there, the solar radiation. So it's not going to damage it too much too quick. And all noisy around here. There's a couple of other things that are kind of a yearly sort of a deal. Make sure that there's no leaks anywhere. That's pretty obvious. This is the hydraulic pump that causes the whole thing to work. This is the filter for the hydraulic fluid. Probably should be changed. I would change it every once a year. And this axle is actually the tank for the hydraulic oil. Holds about 5 gallons. And on this side here, that's where you drain it, or where you fill it. There's a drain underneath. Check the level. There is actually a little sight glass here somewhere. I can't see it quite right now. It's on the other side there. But just check your fluid, make sure that it's clean, and it's also make sure it's topped up. And that's really about the size of the maintenance. Clean that filter that was the fuel filter, just wipe it off or whatever if it's got any chips or anything on it. And that's about it. The maintenance is probably as critical on the saw as it is on anything, because it's what takes the most, I suppose. Have used a chainsaw, know about sharpening it. That's pretty obvious. But another thing is that there's a lot of times the saw will start to cut. I'll turn here so I can show it. You'll start cutting through a log, and then the saw will start to turn. Now there's a couple reasons that can happen. One of the main reasons is you haven't sharpened the saw properly. These teeth, well, I'll show you in a minute when I can show it, from a downward angle so you can see it better. Also, this groove in here where the saw runs can wear, and what it does is you can feel it with your fingernail. This one doesn't have it because I keep it, but it'll sometimes get to be a bit of a lip on there on both sides, and that can cause the chain not to track properly either. So what I do, when you're cutting, you're pushing down on it for the most part. Sometimes you may cut up, but 90% of the time you're pushing down. When that happens, the wear and stress is riding on this bottom edge. So rotate the saw bar, and so every 2 or 3 times, I'll give it a quick dressing when I'm out sharpening when I'm out cutting sometimes, and just redress the blade, from time to time as I'm working. But for the most part, when I do a sort of a significant change like this, or sort of an extra big cleanup or overhaul to change the chain, I always keep a couple of chains, because you never know. Sometimes, no matter how careful you are, you can jam up a chain in a tree, and it can get caught in there as the tree comes over. All kinds of crazy things happen, and I don't want to be way out there when I have an issue that I can't keep moving after I've done all that driving and getting there, and 10 minutes into my job, I'm done. So maintenance is always a very, very good thing on anything that you have. It doesn't take a minute to take this cover off. Like I said, I take it off lots of times anyways, because when I do a fairly big cleaning up and resharpening, other than just dressing it, I always flip the bar. And so that bar gets flipped every probably 3 hours, 4 hours of running time, which might represent a couple of days, but that's the running time that it takes. So anyways, we'll get this adjusted here a little bit. We'll get this adjusting screw, and this is how you tension it. Just bring that tension up a little bit. There we go. That's a good start. We'll leave it there for the moment. That'll get it to the point where I can sharpen it now. And it won't need much sharpening this time, because I actually put this chain on when I started that wood pile, so it really doesn't have a whole lot of time on it. So I'll just get that snugged up nice. I love to sharpen one of these. If you're at home, or in my case at the cabin here, it's just put it in a vise. And if you've got a vise, you could have a vise that mounts on a trailer hitch or something, so that you can actually use it in the field. I don't sharpen it that harshly in the field unless something seriously goes wrong, like I've hit a rock with it, and hopefully that doesn't happen. But here, now I can make absolutely certain that I get a really straight, clean sharpening, so that when I'm out in the field and I want to dress it, just 1 or 2 light strokes with the file on each tooth. Actually, the biggest reason for that is to just get any of the resin and crap off of it, just to make it run a little better. Hope not. Looking directly down on the chain, you can see that this tooth is angled this way with the sharp edge on this side, and then the next tooth is angled the opposite direction with the sharp edge again on the outside, and back and forth it alternates. So basically it's this way and all the way along for the entire chain, of course. So when you're sharpening it, you want to make sure that you get that file at exactly the same angle as what it started out as. And if you're not sure, or if somebody else has messed it up, and I'm sure you probably won't be able to see this, maybe find a cleaner tooth. Probably not. This tooth, I'll clean it just a little bit. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a tiny, tiny little line right there. Let me get back a bit in case it's not focusing. Right there, there's a tiny little line on every single tooth. So this way and this way, and this right at the back of the tooth. And that line is the exact angle that the cut on the front of the tooth is. So if you've got a chain that may not be right, perhaps somebody else has sharpened it, whatever the case may be, you can take your angle from the back on that line, and then you'll know the proper angle that you want to try and get that tooth back to. Normally what I'll do is I'll take a magic marker or something, and I'll make a little mark on one tooth, just black out the top of it with a marker. Anything that can stick on there just briefly. It's not going to last long because the first time you cut with it, it's done. But it just gives me a starting and a finishing point. This is a fairly clean tooth here, not that it matters, but I'm just going to make a little Sharpie mark on the top there. I don't suppose I need to show you that. It's pretty straightforward. It's a little black mark. So now I'm going to bring that tooth to a convenient spot where it's just handy to work on it. Get the correct size file because these chains don't all have the same pitch on the tooth. So make sure you got the right file. And then I'm going to make and I want to keep it level. I'm going to get it right. I can't really do this and show you me doing it from above because I can't hold it, the camera, but I'm going to take, now this chain, like I said, was new not very long ago. Now I skipped that tooth because it goes the other way, and just go to this next one. Now I'm only going to give it 2 or 3 strokes because I'm just basically cleaning them up. But I'm just going to go through here and make sure that we're dressed up, because my next trip, after I split the load that you just saw, or the loads, is way back out that 10 kilometers or more, 6, 7 miles, whatever it is, out into the bush, because I'm not going to cut from my own log pile this next batch. Right there. So that's one. Now what we're going to do is I find it easier, personally, personal choice I suppose, just to turn the saw around so that when I'm doing the other tooth on the opposite direction, it's still handy because I'm right-handed. Just the way it works. I had to use both hands. I lost my marker tooth somehow. It got turned in the process. So we'll just cruise along here. There it is right there. Okay, so we know we've done all the teeth that are going like this. Now we're going to do the ones in the opposite direction, starting at the same point. So we're going to go that way, and we're going to go around until we get back to the beginning. You want to do this carefully because if you change the angle on this tooth, it doesn't cut on the face part, it cuts on this little chisel point right on the corner. And if you don't get that right, you'll blunt that little chisel, and as you can imagine with any chisel, whether it's a hand chisel in your toolbox or this, it's just not going to work as good at all. And it's surprising how big a difference that makes on how well and how fast you can cut. You want to give equal number of strokes on both sides, on the teeth this way and the teeth this way. If you don't, you'll end up shortening a tooth on one side slightly because the tooth wears back as you file it, and over a period of time you wear the chain out. But if you don't keep the teeth sharpened equally, then you're not going to get a straight cut. You're going to get that angled cut, that curve. As I said, you're going to start cutting down, and then it's going to start hooking to one side or the other. And that's no good. So we're going to, oh, there's my master tooth. So we're right back where we started. So that's it. Now there is one other thing that I'm not going to do because, like I said, this is a few times, this is a brand new chain. Let me bring you up closer here. See if we can get here. Now in between the teeth, there's the cutting tooth. There's that chisel. I'll get you back a bit. There's that chisel edge there. That's what does the cutting. And you might see it better on this side. The chisel edge here, and that chisel edge there is what does the cutting along right up to this peak, and this part a little bit as well. In between every tooth is a raker right there. Now that raker serves a couple purposes. I hope you're in focus. It allows this little raker to hook out some of that sawdust and throw it out. That helps keep things from getting kind of bunged up. The other thing it does is it keeps this tooth from cutting all the way down in there, because if it grabbed that whole tooth, you probably couldn't hold on to it. It would give you a kickback, which can be, well, you can't handle it for one thing, and it would be extremely dangerous because this saw can kick up real quick. If it grabs too hard, and if it pulls it out of your hand, well, you know, that could be, because that could be lethal. So these things are set at a certain height for this brand new chain. But as I keep sharpening these back, if you can see, that chain doesn't go straight across. It comes on an angle down a little bit. It's not exactly level. It cuts on a bit of an angle. So what happens is, as I file it and sharpen it, and it moves back further and further in the tooth, that angle causes that tooth to get lower. That sharp edge up here gets a little bit lower. So you have to take a flat file, a fine flat file, and go by every tooth, in between every one, and file these rakers down a little bit to keep in match with the teeth angle that you've got, not the angle, but the teeth height that you've got as you sharpen that. And you don't want to take too much off, but if you don't take any off, pretty soon the raker's going to hit the wood first, and the tooth's not going to bite. If you take too much off, the tooth's going to bite too much, and it's going to be dangerous to use.